Hey Uprisers, this episode of the Acoustic Uprising podcast is brought to you by the ingenious TonewoodAmp. So for those of you who have been living in a sound hole all this time, the TonewoodAmp is an acoustic effects unit that redefines the meaning of the term effects unit. It gives you all the awesome effects you want, like delay, reverb, and overdrive, with none of the baggage. No cables, no amps, pedals required. You simply secure the TonewoodAmp to the back of your guitar magnetically and let the experimentation begin. It's won a bunch of awards too. Guitar World gave it their Platinum Award for excellence, and Acoustic Guitar described it as a cutting-edge product. Head to TonewoodAmp to see more awesome videos, demos, and to purchase. Today we are talking to Andy Mckee from Kansas, USA, a fingerstyle player that needs very little introduction. His music is well known, he's blown up on YouTube, he's a central piece of the story when it comes to the internet and the YouTube phenomenon. He was a centerpiece in the Acoustic Uprising documentary, and this conversation is the entire interview from the documentary. The host of the interview is Brockton, producer on the film, and it's a great conversation with many highlights. He talks about the history of fingerstyle. He's an interesting cat in that he's heavily inspired by the old guard, people like Michael Hedges, Don Ross, Preston Reed, and he is the connector between them and the younger generation. And he's got some incredible stories to share. Just a quick note on the audio. The interviewee, Brockton, is a little bit noisier than we'd like to have on this podcast per normal, but I think you'll find it still very listenable. So enjoy this conversation with Andy Mckee. I know I did.
It's me, it's solo guitar, it's a discipline, it's almost like a martial art.
I'm constantly looking at the instrument in a new way that's pushing my experience of it.
He took the acoustic guitar, he made it sound massive.
I guess it's a one-stop shop for all things shred.
Making an acoustic guitar into something that people weren't expecting it to be.
Like one of those pivotal moments. I want to do that, man. I don't want to try to shred anymore.
With the acoustic, I am the band.
But to someone that's never maybe heard of fingerstyle before or seen it, how would you describe what fingerstyle is to someone?
Well, I guess I would say fingerstyle guitar is it's a very broad term, but in general it means playing, or in my opinion, it means playing steel string acoustic guitar with your fingers. And so, you know, that covers like guys like Leo Kottke and Myrtle Travis and Chet Atkins, to guys like Michael Hedges, you know, or Don Ross or Preston Reed, you know, or Billy McLaughlin, who does almost exclusively tapping on the fretboard. I think all of that stuff falls under the term fingerstyle.
Cool. How would you say it's maybe distinguished from like campfire guitar? You know what I mean by campfire guitar, like the stereotypical, like maybe strumming.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that fingerstyle guitar also sort of, I think it means trying to cover all of the elements of music at the same time on one guitar. So rather than just maybe strumming a G7 chord, you know, or C major or whatever, fingerstyle guitar usually tries to cover rhythmic elements, melodic elements, and harmonic elements all at the same time. So it's not your typical sort of campfire guitar strumming.
I guess in your opinion, and this, again, totally your opinion, traditionally speaking, you know, what do you think the acoustic guitar's role has kind of been in maybe music? And that can be, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe like the rhythm section or classical music or like backing up vocals. Like in your experience, what is the general, I guess, stereotypical view of the acoustic guitar?
Yeah. I think the steel string acoustic guitar is, it's kind of, I've heard some people call it grandpa's guitar, you know, as a term for what it is. But I think a lot of people have this idea that it's just something that sort of accompanies singing, you know, generally. Nowadays, you know, I often call fingerstyle guitar or what I do and a lot of other guys do, sort of modern acoustic guitar, because we're not trying to just strum chords and sing, kind of. We're trying to have a complete piece of music on the steel string acoustic guitar. And a lot of us were sort of inspired by guys like Michael Hedges, you know, where he was trying new ideas and techniques as well on the instrument. So.
Very cool. Hedges is a big topic that I wanted to talk to you about, and I'll maybe get to that a little later. But
cool.
Feel free to drop anything you want to say about Michael.
Okay.
Cool. So that was kind of just like the about fingerstyle questions I had for you. Kind of going a little deeper. Why do you play fingerstyle guitar? I got into the guitar just itself when I was 13 years old, and I really wanted to play because I heard an electric guitar player named Eric Johnson, and you know, I'd been listening to rock music before that, but had never really wanted to play the guitar until I heard Eric. And I think the reason why is I fell in love with his melodic sense, and also that it was instrumental music. I had been listening to some instrumental stuff before that. One of the first cassettes I ever bought was the soundtrack to Rocky IV. And I loved the instrumental stuff on there from a guy named Vince DiCola. I had an album from a group called Art of Noise. It's like instrumental electronic stuff, you know. So instrumental music always resonated with me, and how you could sort of incorporate that into your life, you know, into whatever your story has been so far. You know, maybe some songs with lyrics have a particular story that it's about, and you can't really relate to it necessarily, especially if you're like 8 or 9 years old and you're just listening to music, you know. So I really gravitated towards instrumental stuff, and anyway, that's what got me into the guitar. But I got onto the acoustic when I was 16, and I saw Preston Reed playing guitar. I went to a guitar workshop he was doing, and you know, a cousin of mine took me to go see it, and I was blown away. You know, he was doing instrumental stuff on the acoustic, but was incorporating like percussion and altered tunings, and you know, I went home that night and tried to, you know, replicate what I just saw, and I didn't know he was in different tunings, you know, and I was just trying, but it was horrible. And so anyway, I got a DVD from him, and you know, started to learn some things. But in any case, you know, that's kind of how I got started into it. But the reason I stuck with it is just I loved the idea that you could try to have a complete piece of music on one instrument. You know, you didn't have to call up your friends and be like, "Hey, you want to come practice?" "Oh no, I got going to a movie with my girlfriend." You know, you could do it on your own at any time. So that was definitely a benefit, and just being able to express myself that way. You know, I loved it, and the whole instrumental thing. You know, without the lyrics, as I feel it's the best way for me to express myself and my emotions and my experience in life. Being a solo musician, I mean, that's pretty unique in itself. What's it like? I mean, is there any way that you could, how would you describe the lifestyle of a solo touring musician?
For me, it was a bit of an adjustment, you know, turning into a touring musician. You know, you're looking at a guy that, you know, 20 years ago sat in his room and played Super Nintendo. You know, I didn't go out too much and didn't have a girlfriend until I was like 20. So, you know, going from that to being out on the road, you know, like, I don't even know how many shows I do in a year. It's a lot, you know, and I'm away from home a lot. It was a bit of an adjustment, but, you know, I've always loved interacting with people, though. You know, my mom taught me to be friendly and stuff, you know, and kind. So, you know, and I love getting to meet people after the gigs, you know. It's like my favorite part of the whole show, really. So, it's there, but there's times too when I'm out on the road, and you know, it's usually like when you have a day off, you're like, man, I wish I was home, you know. And I got a couple kids now, so that happens sometimes. But you know, just the professionalism that you have to have on the road, you really have to be on your game. You got to wake up on time, hit the road, and drive. You know, that's something that I kind of learned from touring with Don Ross early on. That he was really kind to take me out to Germany and Canada, and so, you know, seeing how he operated definitely was some insight for me, and I still try to keep up with that. And another thing was I got to tour with Tommy Emmanuel early on too. You know, and we stayed in a little car, you know, for 2 weeks in the UK, and so another great insight for me was just to be on the road with him. And you know, you gotta remember that you're out there to give people a good time that'll hopefully lift them up for a few days, you know, and then get to bed and wake up in the morning and hit the next town. So.
Cool. Maybe describe, so like I kind of want to go back to like the beginning, because this fingerstyle scene has kind of been growing over the past, I don't know, 20 plus years, obviously. Way more than that, obviously, but kind of the modern stuff, I guess, scene more recently.
Yeah.
For you, when you were getting started playing fingerstyle guitar, can you describe what the scene was like, if there was a scene?
Oh man, there was no scene when I was getting into it. I mean, not really. I mean, you could, buy these CDs and stuff. Like Narada was a record label, and of course Windham Hill. And you could find guys like Don Ross and Billy McLaughlin, but I mean, there wasn't really a scene. I mean, we didn't have the internet back then, in any way to connect with people that might be into it. So, like in my town, there was nobody. But one of the things for me to get connected, though, with just fingerstyle guitar and other players was to go to guitar competitions, and I never really won first place in any of those things, but I did well, enough and met some other players. And so they would invite me to, their town and stuff, and I'd invite them to Kansas and Colorado, and let's do a couple gigs down here. So, that was kind of how it was, 15 years ago or so, And so that's how it started to develop anyway. And I guess as far as the actual scene, I guess that it is now, it's a lot due to the internet and us all being able to share videos and things like that and connect. So,
you talked about early on guys like Preston Reed, Don Ross. Can you explain? We have these guys talking about you, right? So, and they're saying good things, obviously.
Good. That's good.
But some kind of connections. How's Don Ross maybe shaped your path as a player?
I discovered Don Ross's music, I think it must have been 1998 or 99, and I was a guitar teacher just at a little music store in Kansas, and I had a student come in and he wanted to learn a Don Ross tune, and I didn't realize it. I guess I had heard him before on one of these Narada records, but I never bought any of his albums quite yet at that point. But anyway, my student brought in this Passion Session album. He wanted to learn the first track called Klimbim, and I put it on, and I was just blown away. I couldn't believe just the energy in that tune, and I don't know, it's like this super joyous kind of tune, I just loved it. It was beautiful. So, I instantly became a fan, and I took that CD home. I told my student I'll bring it back at some point. I'm going to listen to this thing for the next week. And, I just started to try to figure his tunes out, and of course bought many of his albums. And several years later, I was at the Canadian Guitar Festival, and I decided to go up there because I saw that he was a performer, but also that there was this competition. I thought, well, this would be my chance to finally see him play live, maybe meet him, and try this competition. So I did that, and I think I got second or third place that year. And anyway, as soon as I got off the stage, I said, hey, I was number 11 today. My name's Andy Mckee. He was like, man, I had you ranked number 1. I was like, oh my God. It just blew my mind to think, man, this guy who inspired me so much had me ranked number 1. So that was just the start of our friendship, man. And so, he started inviting me up to Canada and Germany and stuff. And he told these guys this guy, Rob Poland at Candy Rat Records about me. And so got on there, and so it's just been great ever since. We taught together at his weekend thing last summer. So it was a lot of fun.
He actually told that story just about how he's in the back and how he heard... I can't remember what song that you played.
I think it was Tight Trite Night.
I think it might have been, yeah.
Yeah, has he got tablature for that?
Cool. So I'm going to ask you the same question, this time Preston Reed. So how has Preston Reed kind of shaped your path as a fingerstyle guitar player?
Well, Preston Reed is actually really the first guy for me who started my whole path down the acoustic guitar. I have this cousin who's 10 years older than me that is a guitar player as well, and he had told me there's this guy playing down at this coffee shop, and he's brought in by Washburn Guitars. He's doing acoustic guitar stuff. You want to go? I was like, sure, why not? So went with him, and it was Preston Reed, and man, I just couldn't believe it. I'd never seen anything like it. I hadn't heard of Michael Hedges or Don Ross or anybody. It was my first sort of experience with fingerstyle guitar. And I really was like one of those pivotal moments where you know that you're not going to be the same anymore. This is like, I want to do that, man. I don't want to try to shred anymore. I don't want to try to keep up with all these guys that are blazing on the electric guitar. It resonated with me so much getting to see him. And so He's the guy that started it, and I ended up getting a VHS cassette tape of his where he was teaching a few of his tunes, you know, and there was a little tablature book in there. So, and I of course bought a couple of his albums. So those things got me just started, you know, learning techniques like playing over the top of the neck and hitting the guitar body for different percussion sounds and altered tunings. And so I started to try to learn more of his songs by ear, and kind of worked on that a lot for a lot of years too, trying to develop my ear. And in any case, I finally met him in person in Ireland, gosh, maybe 10 years ago now almost, or somewhere in there. And we both played at this festival, and, you know, just had a great time. And so we've done tours together and just remain great friends to this day, you know. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Last one I wanted to ask you about was John Gahn. Because I know that you guys both share a deep love for Michael Hedges and his music. Is there any stories like, he told us the Root Witch story?
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk about that now or a little bit later, but I guess how did you meet John? How has he kind of shaped your path, and what's that connection been like for you guys?
Well, I used to go to this website called Root Witch, which was like really the only sort of online resource for Michael Hedges things, you know, anything. And so this was after he'd passed away. And so I was on there, and they have a really active forum, you know, people be talking about their favorite tunes or how do you play this song. And I just remember John Gahn was always on there. There's another friend of mine, Dan Lavoie, who plays harp guitar. I met him on there. You know, just a lot of players were hanging out there. So, and sometimes people would post their music and things like that. So he would post stuff sometimes, and I always thought he was a great player. And, you know, that website kind of died down, and it went away, unfortunately, at one point. So I kind of lost touch with him. But when I went out to England for the first time supporting Tommy Emmanuel, he came to the gig in Leeds, where he's from. So we finally got to meet, you know, in person and have a couple beers and stuff. You know, then a few years ago now, he put videos on YouTube, particularly Passion Flower. And I remember seeing that and just thinking, man, this is like he went another level, you know. It's like, man, with the sort of banjo tuner stuff and singing at the same time. It's like, wow. So yeah, he's just a wonderful guy, though, you know, and an amazing guitar player. And more importantly, I mean, he writes really beautiful music. He's not just screwing around on the guitar. He's really great.
Tommy Emmanuel, that's cool. Can you maybe just, this isn't a question I had written down, but just since I didn't know that you had toured with him before and spent time early on.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you say about him as far as his influence on the fingerstyle guitar scene?
Oh, sure, yeah. I met Tommy Emmanuel. Well, I saw Tommy Emmanuel first play, I think it was in 2000, and he was playing at a bluegrass festival in Kansas, and it's the Walnut Valley Festival, where they have the International Fingerstyle Guitar Championships and all that. And man, I remember a friend of mine, Stephen Bennett, great musician as well, was saying, you got to see Tommy, man. He's a friend of mine from Australia. You're not going to believe it. And I was like, okay, sure. You know, and he was playing at like the smaller side stages at Winfield, and there would be just like 1,000, you know, or more people just crowded around this tiny stage, like, and we were just all like, what in the world is this? Are you kidding me? And so that was my first experience ever seeing him, and it just blew my mind. I mean, as far as his ability to just play so effortlessly, man, and entertain, you know, and his arrangements are just amazing. So, you know, going from that and then getting an opportunity to open for him in England, and now actually we have the same management team. And in fact, I've got a live album coming out soon that is actually under his label. I'm the first guy on his label other than him to release a thing, so that's really cool, you know. He's definitely raised awareness about instrumental acoustic guitar, fingerstyle guitar. You know, what he does and what I do are kind of different. I mean, he's kind of more from the, you could say, Chet Atkins, Merle Travis thing, and maybe I'm more from the Michael Hedges thing, but we're all playing the acoustic guitar, and it's great to have him raise that level of awareness where he's playing like 2,000 people, you know, every night, wherever he goes, kind of thing. It's cool.
Cool. Yeah, that's cool that I didn't know that you guys had the same management. That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Shifting gears a little bit, you talked about shred a little bit in there. Is there a connection between kind of the shred scene and fingerstyle? Have you, in your opinion, have you seen something like that aside from just your personal experience? Or
Yeah, sure. I think that a lot of the guys, maybe my age, sort of this generation, maybe you could say, might have started out with like what you might call shred guitar or metal, you know, and trying to play fast on the electric guitar. I think maybe a lot of us got into the guitar in one way or another, and then, you know, as with anything, you try to get better and better at it, so you start to see what are all the things, you know, and you find these guys that are playing so fast, and so well, how do you do that? And you know, myself and a lot of the guys, I think, you know, got into that. And so a lot of us, though, ended up finding this acoustic guitar stuff and finding that kind of resonated with us maybe a bit more. So, but yeah, I think I think the majority is a lot of us were doing that kind of playing, even though we don't really do it so much anymore. But I think you ask those guys, yeah, you like Dream Theater? Yeah. You like you like Yngwie Malmsteen? Sure.
That's great. Cool. Can we talk a little bit about Candy Rat and then the drifting?
Sure.
Because, I mean, from our research, you know, as fans and everything, that was kind of, the drifting song was kind of the event.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
For fingerstyle, at least for the online movement, digital movement. So, I mean, tell me the story how you got connected with, and you've kind of alluded to it with Don a little bit, but how you got connected with Rob and Candy Rat.
Sure. I'm pretty sure it was in 2004 or 5 anyway. I got an email from a guy named Rob Poland saying, hey, I'm starting a new label, and this guy Don recommended you for the label. And I have a few friends that play guitar named Don. I didn't actually know who he meant exactly. And it turned out it was Don Ross, you know, and I'd really just met him maybe a month or two prior, so I didn't assume it was him. But to hear that he was recommending me for this label, I was like, man, I should do it. Don's going to be on it. You know, he's a big influence for me. So I figured, sure, and you know, got to know the guy, and it turned out, I mean, he just was a massive fan of Don Ross, and Don didn't have a label anymore. Narada had kind of left the business, the label he was on, so Rob decided, oh, let's start a label and see what we do. So I got on there, and he added some more artists and stuff, and it was looking like a pretty cool roster, you know, a lot of great players. So I released an album on there where I took some tunes from my very first album, which is called Nocturne, which I only made 1,000 copies of, you know, 15 years ago. And I figured, well, this will be a broader way to get those tunes out, and maybe some from my Dreamcatcher album. That's another one that I released up by myself, you know. So I did that, and that became an album called Art of Motion. So we put that out, and some time went by, and, you know, I was out on the road with Don Ross and Michael Mannering. And we did a show in Milwaukee, and then we had a few days off, and Rob said, let's shoot some YouTube videos. So that was the next step.
Right now, like, I looked at the site today, and 7 out of the top 10, like, most viewed videos are your videos. And I think there's over, like, 53 million views.
Oh, on
drifting alone.
Oh, okay, on Candy Rat's side or something?
Candy Rat's
okay.
side, yeah.
Wow. Holy cow. Jeez, I didn't know
cool,
that.
yeah.
I didn't even know that statistic.
Yeah.
So I think right now drifting has, it's somewhere like a little over 50 million views or something, you know, and it's just mind-boggling to think about. I mean, we had no plans or no expectations, you know, for these videos. It was like, hey, YouTube's a new platform. Let's put some videos on. Maybe we'll get some new fans. And you know, we did that, and I went back home and started teaching my guitar lessons, and I had a student that missed his lesson, so I just went on the computer and went to YouTube to see what was up, you know, and I saw that drifting was on the front page, and that was the first kind of like, whoa. Well, actually, you know, before that, earlier that morning, I noticed that I was getting a lot of emails to buy my tablature. Like, maybe in a week I would get 5 orders, you know, whereas that morning I had like 20. I was like, what? And some guy had emailed me and said, hey, I posted your video on dig.com, which is like a place to share stuff, I guess. And I was like, oh, cool, thanks, man. And then I went to, you know, see this when I went to my teaching gig and saw that it was on the front page of YouTube, you know. And then that was when I called Rob and said, man, go to YouTube and see the drifting's on the front page. So he said, buckle up. I remember, you never know what's going to happen, man. You better buckle up. So,
what was for drifting, we'll just talk about Drifting here.
Sure.
What was kind of the inspiration behind that song for you?
Well, from a technical standpoint, Drifting was inspired by the playing of Preston Reed, you know. It's a bit funny because I really don't have that many songs where I do a lot of percussion on the guitar body or play over the top of the neck, but Drifting was really my only one until I wrote Hunter's Moon a few years ago. But in any case, it was definitely inspired by his playing, but on a more sort of like emotional sense of where it came from. I dropped out of high school when I was 16 years old and decided to just work on playing guitar, you know, and then I had a bunch of friends that were going to college, so I said, well, maybe I'll give college a try. So I moved in with them, and we all decided to go to the University of Kansas, and I lasted one day before I decided it wasn't for me. You know, don't get me wrong, I love to learn, you know, but just the sort of environment of school learning, it just never really felt right to me anyway, so I dropped out from that, and I moved back in with my mom, you know, and started teaching guitar lessons, and that's when I wrote it, and so I just kind of felt like I was drifting, like I didn't know what I was doing exactly, like how am I going to make a living, you know. I guess I could teach guitar, but, you know, maybe I could be a performer someday. I'll just keep trying to maybe write music, and yeah, that's how it came about.
In your opinion, why do you think that song had such an impact on you two?
Well, I think it's funny. I think there's a lot of reasons why Drifting went viral. I think one of the main things is I got in early. I think YouTube wasn't that huge 10 years ago at all. So, you know, I think that I had that on my side for sure, that wasn't inundated with a lot of guitar videos yet. So it was a little bit easier to get noticed. So there's that. I think I was, you know, playing the guitar in that unusual way over the top of the neck and tapping and stuff. A lot of people, I'm sure, never saw anything like that, especially of the younger generation, you know, people maybe that were getting on YouTube, never heard of Preston Reed or Michael Hedges, you know. So just visually, it's good for that sort of platform. And then I think even I looked a bit unusual, you know. I had long hair for the longest time, but things started to get kind of thin on top. So, you know, I preemptive strike and just shaved it all off, and decided to grow a beard out there for a while, as best I could. It really wasn't that good, but it looked okay on YouTube. But so yeah, you know, and I had more weight on me, so I was like this big guy with a bald head and a big beard playing guitar. Like, what the hell is this guy? So I think that didn't hurt either. And then maybe I like to think too that the music kind of resonated with some people too. So I think just all that stuff, you know, combined to make it go viral, and it totally changed my life, you know.
That was what I was going to ask you too. Is how has YouTube kind of affected your life as a musician?
Yeah, putting the videos on, I mean, I always kind of say this in interviews and stuff, but I don't know any other better sort of analogy. It was just kind of like a fast forward button on my career. I mean, I started to have things happening for me, you know, with doing well in some contests and meeting Don Ross, you know, and there was actually, even before that, there was a guy in Taiwan that heard about me in 2003, and I got to go to Taiwan and China and do performances because he liked what I was doing. So, I mean, there was things starting for me, but it really just seemed like all of a sudden people all over the planet knew who I was and what I did on the guitar. So suddenly these opportunities came in to start playing more, you know, and hey, you want to tour here? You want to tour over here? You want to do this, you know? And fortunately, I was able to get like a manager, and that led to me getting an agency because, I mean, I was just getting inundated, you know, and my wife had a job of her own. It wasn't like I could say, hey, you want to help me with all this? Nope. But, I mean, she would have helped some, of course, but it was just getting too much, you know. And so making those sort of connections helped a lot. And now it's where it's like a business, you know, and I have publicists and things like that work with me to keep things rolling and get it on the road and play music for people.
All right. Can we talk a little bit about history and Michael Hedges a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of a broad question, but who was Michael Hedges?
We get like emotional, maybe. Michael changed like everything. And catch my breath a bit. I discovered him in 1997, and I was going through these old guitar player magazines that same cousin gave me, and on the cover of one was Michael with a harp guitar, and I remember just thinking, wow, what is this guy? And inside the magazine was actually a little record you could tear out and put on, so I did that and was blown away. It was actually his tune, Because It's There, and I couldn't believe it. And so I looked through more magazines, and I found another one where he had a transcription of his song called The Naked Stalk, and so I tuned my guitar up, and was trying to play it, and was just blown away by the music, and went out that night and bought all the albums I could find. I found Taproot and I think Live on the Double Planet. So those were my first albums I got from him. And yeah, I mean, of all the guitar guys, I mean, just on a personal level, for some reason, his music really resonated with me, like in a different way. And just his approach to composition, and you could just hear the emotion, and so for me, it completely changed my life, and I revere him so much, I think he was the guy that really kind of changed everything about 35 years ago now, even when he came out, and there was, of course, people using different tunings and things before him, but just his approach to the instrumental acoustic guitar there was nothing like it before him, and really still I don't think anything quite like it still. We're all of course writing our own music and doing things, but I think he was just a certain level of revolution happened when he did it, and it's just like, wow.
What are some things people might not know about Michael Hedges? Maybe his personality-wise, his kind of eccentricity. I know that he was
yeah. Well, unfortunately, I never got to meet Michael. I mean, I discovered his music the same year that he died. It was just a few months before he died. So I never got to meet him, but I've met his brothers, his sister, his son, and I've met dear friends of his being out on the road and stuff. So the one thing that everyone says is he was humble and kind, and that resonated through interviews you see with him, or read about him. But he was definitely a bit unusual too, I think. He liked to practice yoga before he went on stage, and he would take a juicer and all these vegetables in his hotel room and things like that. And I mean, I guess that's not weird, but that was just who he was.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
What was meeting? I saw on Facebook a while back that you met Misha.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe that story, what that was like for you, meeting him and some of his family members?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll touch on each of them. I met, first I met his brother Craig in Arizona. I was played at a performing arts center there, and a friend of mine, Michael Galazian, who's a great guitarist as well, knew him and invited him to the show. So, he came backstage after Michael's set and before I went on, and we got to meet, and I just got to tell him, that your brother changed my life, and we both got very emotional, and because they all miss him a lot, like we all do, but particularly them because it was their brother. But I got to meet his sister in San Francisco a few months after that, and it was the same kind of thing, just teary-eyed. And before I even knew I was going to get to meet any of them, I had decided that I really wanted to learn aerial boundaries. I never did, because I would get to this middle part of that tune, and anybody that might watch this, if they've ever tried to learn aerial boundaries, they know what I'm talking about. It's so hard where you have to stop strings from ringing out while you're plucking other ones, and it's not even visually stimulating. Like most of the tune has a lot of really kind of visually cool things, but you have to stop strings from ringing out. It's so hard. But I really tried hard to figure it out. So in any case, at those at those shows where I got to meet them, I played Aerial Boundaries as an encore, and so it was very emotional to meet them and talk about that at the end of the night. And then Misha, I met him in Boston last year, and he's doing video stuff, and so we talked about maybe doing some of that together in the future. That'd be really cool. So it was just it was great for me because I never got to tell Michael that, how much he meant to me. So to be able to tell his family, it meant the world to me.
How do you feel about Michael Hedges' legacy on fingerstyle guitar now? Can you speak to that, like maybe going forward, what his legacy is, you think, for what it means to the scene?
I think the importance of Michael Hedges and the whole scene of this sort of modern fingerstyle thing is not only was he extremely creative, with what he did on the guitar, but just his musical sense, was so high. And I think that's due to he was listening to so many types of music. He played the flute and piano and all kinds of things, So he was just a really high caliber musician, and that I think comes through in his compositions. So I think the biggest thing that anyone should take away, I think, from listening to Michael Hedges isn't necessarily just the crazy techniques and all that, but just his attention to the music, and what he created, and how he was able to really affect people over the planet with that.
In your opinion, do you think he's still reaching new audiences?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think he's absolutely still reaching new people, and I mean that was honestly for me one of the reason I started to play one or two of his songs at my shows. I've written a tune as a tribute to him, and whenever I would introduce it, I'd say, "You guys know Michael Hedges," and it would be some people, but it wouldn't be like the whole audience was like, "Yeah," and so I felt that's just not right, If you're here to see me and you don't know about Michael Hedges, let me play you one of his tunes. So, so yeah, he's at least through what I'm doing anyway. I know I'm reaching some new people with his stuff, and I always talk about him in interviews, just because I feel like I have to, because he's gone, and so many people don't know.
Kind of going to this might be a weird question. Would you rather, the musical scene right now with technology, Spotify, all that crazy stuff? In your opinion, is it a good time to be a musician, or would you have rather have been a professional musician 25 years ago or something like that?
Man, that's which came first, the chicken or the egg, a little bit for me, because I think, in some ways, I think it would be good if I were a musician 25 years ago, but then at the same time, I don't know if I could have been a musician 25 years ago as far as my career taking off like it did. I totally owe so much to the internet as far as my career goes, and reaching people. But at the same time, of course, there's things like file sharing and streaming services, which really don't pay much to the actual artists that are creating the music, So in the end, I think if you feel like you need to be a musician, then you're probably going to need to be a musician. There's not really much choice, so it doesn't really matter if it's a good time or not, I guess, is the bottom line. And that's how it always felt to me. I couldn't do anything else. But there's definitely things that are harder now. It's like you have to be on the road. And for someone like me that I alluded to earlier, I do like being home and being with my family and stuff. It can make it hard sometimes, but at the end of the night, when I get to meet everybody, it makes it all worth it, and it's just a matter of finding the right balance,
Sure. Last question. Where's this fingerstyle thing going? Will it sustain? Is it a trend? Is it? In your opinion, from your experience and what you've seen, where is it going, and where would you like to see it go?
Well, I guess the fingerstyle guitar scene, I suppose the popularity might wax or wane, it could be considered really lame, next year, I don't know, but I don't really care. I think as long as I, feel like I need to create stuff, I'm going to keep creating it, and hopefully there'll be some people there. But, I don't think we're ever going to be like selling out stadiums, with this kind of music. I think just by its nature, it's a very intimate kind of thing. So, like tonight in Washington, maybe this is like a 300-seat place or something. I think that's a pretty good number, and I love doing that, and especially getting to see people's faces up close, so hopefully we can keep that going for a long time.
Andy, thank you. I appreciate it, man. This has been a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Yeah.
This episode of the Acoustic Uprising podcast has been brought to you by the ingenious TonewoodAmp. So for those of you who have been living in a sound hole all this time, the TonewoodAmp is an acoustic effects unit that redefines the meaning of the term effects unit. It gives you all the awesome effects you want, like delay, reverb, and overdrive, with none of the baggage. No cables, no amps, pedals required. You simply secure the TonewoodAmp to the back of your guitar magnetically and let the experimentation begin. It's won a bunch of awards too. Guitar World gave it their Platinum Award for excellence, and Acoustic Guitar described it as a cutting-edge product. Head to TonewoodAmp to see more awesome videos, demos, and to purchase. Thanks to Thomas Lieb for the theme song music, Grooveyard.